I'm at Ripon College in Cuddeston, just outside Oxford, and I'm here to meet Cathy Ross, Dr. Cathy Ross, who will soon be one of the canons of Leicester Cathedral, Canon Theologian, and we're going to find out a little bit about her and what she'll be bringing to Leicester Diocese. Well, Cathy, first of all, thank you so much for talking to us, or agreeing to talk to us today, and congratulations on the announcement that you're to be our Canon Theologian. But that kind of raises a question in my mind. Theology. The word sounds very academic, very intellectual. Is it something for specialist Christians?
Thank you, John. Good question. And actually, in some ways, even having this interview here in the chapel, it's a slightly rarefied, beautiful but rarefied space, isn't it? And Canon Theologian can sound a little intimidating, but actually I think theology is for everybody, because as soon as we begin to think about the world, about life, about spirituality, about God, about what it means to live together, to be a good neighbour, what it means to live well in our families, what it means to respect the planet and live gently on this earth. I think all those are theological issues and the kinds of things that we should be grappling with, reflecting on. I think you can talk about theology in the cafe. There's a phrase, kitchen table theology. I love that because it means that theology is domestic. Maybe we just need to wrest it from the academic theologians and from the dusty bookshelves and just bring it into our homes and public spaces and places. So I think theology actually is for every human being. And I guess for me, the heart of theology, or the crux of it, or the most exciting part of it, is to have a relationship with Jesus. So I think theology should be at its best encouraging us, nurturing us to be friends with Jesus. What could be better than that?
Well, that's a really exciting response, encouraging to hear you earth it in that very everyday way and to bring it into that relationship that we can enjoy as followers of Jesus. But pushing things a little further, I had a look at your online kind of Googled biography, short biography. It described you as a contextual theologian. What does that even mean?
So context really is just about our place and our space. So we're all in different contexts. And sometimes the best way to understand our context is to actually leave it and go to another context. And that, I think, is how I became interested in being a contextual theologian, partly because my initial degree is in French and German, so I loved learning foreign languages, but also from our time living overseas as mission partners. So we lived in Congo and Uganda and Rwanda. So just to give you some examples of what contextual theology means and how it's really challenged and enhanced my faith. So in Africa, for example, Africa's a big place, but in sub-Saharan Africa they talk about I am because we are. So it's not the Cartesian enlightenment, I think therefore I am individualistic worldview. It's I am because we are, so I can't live without you. Or if we think of liberation theology from Latin America, in that particular context in the 1970s where there were right-wing dictatorships and a lot of injustice, they reminded us that God is a God of justice and of the importance of the prophetic and being able to name that and see it and articulate it. Or if we think of feminist theology, of which I am a particular fan, I think feminist theology has helped us to talk and think about God differently, that God is neither male nor female, that God is spirit, and maybe to have a more fully orbed picture of God, to pick up some of the more feminine attributes of God and not be afraid to name those or to acknowledge them. So for me, contextual theology from other parts of the world just enlivens my relationships with God by being aware of world Christianity and what it means to be a world Christian, and just, I think, makes our faith much more rich and diverse, and I think saves it from domesticity.
So lots there in what you said about people and place and God. And just think about people a bit more. Would it be right to say that you very much see essential this idea of movement of people in mission, kind of doing God's mission? Is that kind of where your passion and your heart is to an extent?
It's another good question. So mission, I guess mission is really what excites me and gets me up in the morning. And I guess for me, mission is really about what Ryan Williams and Bishop John Taylor and others have said. It's almost become a cliche, but it is about finding out what God is doing, God's Spirit is doing, and joining in. It's not about us charging in and saving the world. It initiates from God, and it's us listening and learning and waiting and discerning and joining in with God. And I loved your question about movement, because I think mission really does imply movement. And I really think that mission is about crossing borders, whatever that may be. It might be geographical borders, it might be emotional borders, or psychological or cultural borders, because if we don't move, if we don't cross borders, then I think our faith atrophies and dies, and we just become insular and isolated. So we really need to be outward looking and to be active and proactive and engaged in movement. I guess the heart of mission for me is, as I've already said, a relationship with Jesus, getting to know Jesus, so that we can become the person that God created us to be, and that, more importantly, we can become the community and the world that God has created us to be. And thinking about mission in the context of Leicester Diocese, I mean, what are the issues in your context, and what are the things in your communities that you would want to change and make better? And recently at CMS Church Mission Society, where I also work, we produced this zine, we called it a zine, Future Present, a very lovely publication. And it's all about imagining a new world. If we could have a new world, if we could have the kingdom of God now, what would it look like? So in this zine, we've got articles about reimagining prisons, reimagining incarceration, reimagining God, reimagining the church. So what could the kingdom of God look like now, and how could we bring that about?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And speaking about context, obviously in our diocese, where we're, perhaps you could say we're a rural diocese with an urban centre, those contexts will look different in different places where we're worshipping or where our Christian communities are. And so there's lots for us to be thinking about there. But just to finish and to kind of slightly personalise it, I guess, a little bit more. You're a theologian, you're a writer, but you're also a preacher and a mother and a wife and a grandmother and all these various things. We all live very complicated lives these days. Do you have a kind of any sort of life tips, life hacks for Christians for discipleship and how to integrate our faith, who we are in Jesus, with all those other things that happen in our lives?
Okay, life hacks. Well, one thing that we learnt in Africa was gratitude. So I try every day to be grateful for something. I mean, in Uganda, for example, we would always give thanks before a humble cup of black tea. This may sound slightly contradictory in terms of busy lives, but I'm always saying to the students, you need to get out more. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean going overseas or going into a different cultural context, but there is this very good African proverb that says, he or she who never leaves home thinks that their mother is the best cook. So I think sometimes just being in a different perspective, being in a different context, gives us a fresh perspective in our own. Embrace our humanity, we're whole people, so what is it that enlivens us and helps us to flourish? And then a little challenge that I've set myself recently is to maybe learn or practice or engage in a new skill. So for example, I have taken up writing poetry. It's not very good, but I enjoy thinking about it and creating poems, and God is an amazing creator God, and I think we can all be creative. So I think in the church, we really need to enhance and use creativity and use our imagination. Sometimes I think we have a bit of a lack of imagination. So use our imaginations, our creativity, and take up a new skill and see where that might lead us.
Well, thank you. I love that African proverb. I'm going to try and take that away with me. I think there's a lot in that. But Cathy, it's been absolutely delightful spending some time with you this afternoon. Thank you for answering our questions, taking the time to be with us. We look forward to your installation in Leicester Cathedral and your time with us as Canon Theologian. So thank you ever so much.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time and coming to get to know me a little. I'm very excited to be Canon Theologian for the diocese. Seems like a really exciting diocese with lots of good things happening and a missional impulse. So I'm very much looking forward to being involved.